Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jean, the Digital Event Coordinator at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. We are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges by using creative technology. For those of you who haven't attended a webinar section with us before, Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand facilitate training calendar on online webinars, workshops, boot camps, and webcons to help the social sector upskill in all digital areas. So please check out our training and education menu on our website for more events coming up. So today, I'm very excited to welcome you for the Building Your Volunteer Funnel topic with Mr. Alex, the Partner Engagement Manager of Volaby. So Alex manages the partnerships team of Volaby and is the go-to-market manager for Orange Sky's Delta team. As a volunteer from Lifetime himself, Alex is incredibly passionate about all things volunteering and innovations, so particularly when they are combined. So Alex's career spans across the engineering, tech, marketing, and not-for-profit sectors. But regardless of the environment, he is always motivated by out-of-the-box thinking to improve the world around us and the world we operate. So before we begin, we'll start with a bit of housekeeping. So all lines are muted. So if you have any technical issues, please just type into the questions box on your webinar panel, and I'm here to assist you. If you have any questions during the sections, please also type it into the questions box, and Alex will answer them by the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as you think throughout the sections, so just to make it as interactive as possible. So no question is silly, but please also note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you're having a Wi-Fi connections and having multiple programs opened, this can sometimes affect the quality of the webinars. So please, if possible, please try to close all other programs while the sections begin. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded. A link with the recordings and the slides will be sent to you in 1 to 2 business days. And finally, I would like to remind you that we are short survey at the end of the webinar. So please help us to complete the survey so that we can provide you an even better experience in the future. All right, so now I'll hand over to Alex for the section today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jean. Hey everyone, thanks so much for coming on board. Really excited today. We've done a lot of work in the last 2 years, and I guess the purpose of this presentation, as Jean said, was around building a volunteer management funnel. And I guess the short story to this was we've doing a non-profit software solution for a while now, and probably in the beginning to now we've had over 700 conversations with different non-profit organizations, and this essentially is the output to some really tough lessons, but some really interesting ones that we really want to share with people and hopefully can help others. And another outcome of this was we developed our own volunteer management funnel template, which Jean will share at the end of this, and everyone can feel free to use it if they like. So we'll get straight into it. So firstly, who we are, of course. So we are from the organization Orange Sky. So we've been, for those who aren't familiar, we do mobile shower and laundry services for those experiencing homelessness. And we've got, I believe, 32 vans in Australia, 2 in New Zealand, and we operate about 250 weekly shifts, and that's across around about 2,000 volunteers on a weekly basis. We originally started in Southeast Queensland, in Brisbane here, and we've grown across the 2 countries now, and we're beginning to look into remote Indigenous communities and seeing how we can help out there now. And I guess probably the background said before, probably the first 2 years when we started, I believe the story is the first employee we ever had was a developer, and Nick, one of our founders, wanted to develop a platform that was helping to onboard, roster, and all the operations of volunteers, and then record impact data. And from that, we learned a lot about the behavior of volunteers and how to sort of best set that up. As I said, for the last 2 years, we've had many conversations, plus a survey which covered about 26 volunteer managers around their pain points and how they operate each day and what they can do from that. So the outputs to this was, really a big summary of that and some of the lessons learned. So I guess the first part, something that before I think something that I advocate a lot and I like to harp on about is I don't think you can ever really solve a problem first unless you understand the challenge and the issue where it's coming from originally. So I think after, as I said, 700 conversations and many surveys and interviews and talking to people, we tried to get down to the core, and we thought, as far as volunteer operations, like the challenges that come with it. And we said, if you could summarize the holistic challenge what it means to be a volunteer manager or work with volunteers and what the opportunity is. And I've refined this with a couple of organizations that have helped me write this. So I'll read this for you now. And I guess the problem statement really is, I need volunteers to help achieve my mission or community goal. And although I love and care deeply for my volunteers, it can be extremely time consuming and frustrating to manage them, as due to their external commitments, 90% of them can at times be unreliable or non-committal for their volunteering duties, and that's not a bad thing, because typically it's their third or fourth priority in life. They've got things like family or school or work or other commitments in their life, and sadly volunteering seems to be the first thing that sort of drops off their list when things get tough. So, and finally, without highly engaged and highly active volunteers, I cannot achieve my mission, and therefore I cannot continue to run my organization. And this is really a problem statement that the team and we always think about a lot when it comes to what should we develop, or how should we help, or what can we do, and it really comes back down to that point, is that volunteers are by far, and it's probably a bit biased, I'm speaking this from my perspective, but some of the most amazing people I've ever met, and I have so much respect for them. But at the end of the day, we can't ignore that they live very busy lives, and I think there is a balance between the majority of people's willing to commit to certain things and the necessity as an organization, what they need from volunteers, which can sort of be that forever tug of war between the two. So coming through some of the survey results that we got when we spoke with a lot of these volunteering organizations, we tried to diagnose this problem, and what we found that people were spending in terms of managing volunteers, it was somewhere between 1 or 2 hours a week to up to 30 hours a week. Some people who said all hours of the night, they're answering text messages and emails and phone calls to try and get people out to shift or out to their activities or whatever the volunteering operation consisted of. And a summary of this was, on average, it was about 7.3 hours per week, and the people that we spoke with, and that was spent managing volunteers, where the large majority of that down here was really around, I said, phone calls, emails, things like WhatsApp groups, Facebook, SMS, and a fair chunk of that was really on around sort of admin work and chasing people up, and which, although is a necessity, we sort of look at this, and my brain is as addicted I am to efficiencies. I'm like, how can this be improved? Like, how can, if people are doing the same things over and over again, how can we make that much more efficient, but also not lose that connection, which I'll get to in a second too. But I think managing volunteers is certainly an art and a science to it, and there is obviously having efficiencies is one thing for the organization, but not forgetting that we still want to love and thank and stay connected to our volunteers and what they do. But one of the most blaring takeaways from this part of our process was at sort of one full-time day that people spend per week as like a job to follow things up here. Although, of course, nonprofits, we're not here, we don't measure efficiency on cost and time, but rather I find it's really an opportunity cost. If there's one day spent doing phone calls and interviews and trying to chase people up, how amazing would that be to see if we could use that time to do something else? If there's a way we could help them run another shift, or if there was a way to maybe help them utilize applying for grants, or whatever that piece is that could help, I guess, add to their organization as opposed to running around like crazy. And that's a good point. Here's the next part of some of the answers that we found, and we asked people, I guess, regarding your volunteer engagement, what do you want to spend less time on? And of course, admin was by far the biggest piece. Things around recruitment, things around rostering, trying to find replacements for the shifts. A lot of actually had a consistent feedback of some saying that if we can't get enough volunteers, they'll say, we'll just pull in our boots and we'll go do it ourselves, which is very lovely and committing for them, but something we want to avoid because we would love to use those guys for other more important duties as well. Another one also was answering the same questions over and over again. And I think that comes back to that first point around the volunteer funnel that, and I might have it, might be on the next couple of slides, but I'll just note it here now. I think out of all the conversations we spoke with, I think if we looked at the funnel, there was people who, I think on average, if someone said 100 people were to apply or be interested to volunteer, out of that 100, we probably noticed 50% would probably fall into the actually filling out the forms and saying that, their profile or uploading their documentation. Out of those 50, we'd probably see 20 that would come to an induction. Out of those 20, we'd probably see 10 that would come to a first shift. And out of those, we'd probably see 5 or less that would consistently volunteer for more than, say, 6 to 12 months. It is a sobering thought when you sort of when you match it down like that. But I think the amount of conversations that we've had, I think it's so consistent that we try to think of if that's the case and that's the way the volunteering world behaves, then how can we best utilize that and for the volunteers' advantage and for our benefit as well too. So sorry, that goes back to that point around answering that same question. If maybe there's FAQs or brochures or a guide to really help people, so it saves a lot more time for us to really utilize and do the other important tasks. On the flip side of that, which was the nicer piece, was people asked if they could spend less time and we could solve that 7.3 hours a week, what would they spend less time on? And that was really around obviously more time on the cause, helping people, and that's a big reason why these people do what they do. Big piece around growth, around writing for grants, the nice parts of volunteering, giving recognition to people and participating in some of the nicer, bigger events as well and getting amongst it. So this was one too when we took that problem statement and we saw, well, at the end of that problem statement was really around the goal of highly active and highly engaged volunteer. The goal is to get highly active and highly engaged volunteers with less time. And we sort of, well, how's it through better volunteer management? And something that, of course, people who are listening, who are definitely more accustomed to managing volunteers, this obviously is 101 for them, but it's clearly there's volunteer coordination, I think there's volunteer engagement, and I think they're both equally as important. And I chat to our team a fair bit, and I think it sounds a lot like an art versus science. And I think looking at smaller organizations with, say, less than 50, less than 10 volunteers, engagement is clearly more favorable, and engagement is more around the idea of loving and thanking and calling with them and meeting with them on shift. There's a community center that we work with, and their engagement is quite amazing. They like to take them out for field trips to other community centers and meet people and really, I guess, make them feel connected to their cause. And I think that's a super important, if not the most important piece. And then there's the volunteer coordination, which tends to be more relevant for larger organizations around the medium to large areas of people saying that, yep, we've got people engaged, but at the end of the day, the organization needs X, Y, and Z tasks done. So we need to coordinate both onboarding of volunteers through their workflow, what they need to fill out, what they need to do, all the way into the rostering, making sure that people are at the right place at the right time, doing the right things in order for the whole machine to keep moving forward, I guess. Another important, I guess, key points on this was I found that when it comes to coordination, it can be automated easier. Clearly, when it comes to more of the human connection aspect is really difficult to automate, if not that might even destroy it. But when it comes to coordinating, maybe that's the piece of the pie, or maybe that's the side of management that we can automate and make faster and easier with things like technology. Engagement can be more complex and I think has a stronger human element. But at the end of the day, at least in my opinion, I think they're both super important to make sure there's either both sides of the scale, the organization and the volunteers, both have a positive and beneficial experience. So as far as the volunteer funnel, and this probably for the sake of this presentation, a good point, this will probably focus more on the coordination, because I think when it comes to engagement, it's very much a personality thing and everyone's different, they have their own way of connection and what connection means to them. But as far as efficiencies and the sake of this presentation, I'll probably focus on the coordination piece a little bit more. So when we look at sort of a funnel and what we find, you got the very top of the funnel, and that's really around sourcing volunteers. So if we look at areas, I guess, where we would find volunteers and where they come from, some people have word of mouth through friends, some people through things like really amazing organizations like Volunteer in Australia or Seek Volunteer or Go Volunteer, and having people, I guess, find out that you exist first and foremost. And here is that piece I mentioned before around what that conversion rate typically, what we find looks like. Again, this isn't set in stone. This is just from feedback and talking to organizations. Some are higher than this, some people are lower than this. But I guess what they find is that at the end of the day, whatever their conversion rate is from top to bottom of the funnel, there's only two things you can ever do with a funnel. That's fill it and convert it. So as far as filling the funnel, looking at different areas where we can get the name out for volunteers. So Facebook ads, referral systems, Seek Volunteer, as I mentioned, landing pages, maybe references on other people's sites, partnerships. And then once they land into it, what does the onboarding process look like and how can we make that more efficient? I think in a perfect world, we want this funnel to just flow naturally and a lot, but I think that sometimes there's some tweaks and changes need to be made. Things like, what does your expression of interest form look like? There was a couple of organizations we spoke with who did some research on theirs, and something that always sticks in my mind was they said if the expression of interest form is too long, if they have to if they open it up and they scroll through it, it looks like it's a couple of pages long, there's like a 40% chance they'll just stop and they won't even start completing it because they'll go, no, this is too much effort. I just want to help. I'm done. Bit of a different tug of war there because we want people to give us the right information, make sure we're doing our homework, but getting that balance between making it really pleasant and enjoyable experience that they can walk through. And finally, once they go through, I guess, that onboarding process, things around doing their online inductions or their face-to-face inductions or their meetings, after 700 conversations, the clearest thing was everyone is so very different. Some people have basically put your name down and your phone number so we know how to call you, and that's it. And then other organizations we've spoken with have 6 or 7 checkpoints. They want to have interviews, screening calls, induction days, training, which totally understand. So I guess whatever that process looks like at each step, how efficient and enjoyable and pleasant that flow can be, and then moving down into what the actual operations look like. And here is a yellow circle, which one of our developers likes to coin the golden circle. And that's not taking the name from the juice company, so we're not trying to use that for commercial purposes. But they said with that golden circle was once a volunteer is in a process and in an organization, I guess the goal that we really want to see is getting them active, involved, appreciated, recording that information for them, what they did, their hours, making them feel that connectivity, and then getting them active as quickly as possible again. And then hopefully we can keep that circle moving more and more and more. And some really important pieces that we found during this process and some feedback we got from a lot of the organizations was really around the important pieces with reminders. There's a really interesting balance there, and my opinion is we've tried ourselves as well as other organizations. When it comes to reminders, I think volunteers say, I'm very, very busy. Can you just let me know where I need to be, what I need to do, and and how often I need to do it? And so they welcome a lot of reminders to just keep them in front of mind. Whereas we've noticed other people get very frustrated. They'll say, you sent me 4 text messages, leave me alone. Like I told you I couldn't be there, or I'm not sure what's going on tomorrow. So there's that fine balance. I think again, each cohort and each volunteer can be quite different. Access to information, people saying that they got stuck and they said, I didn't even know who to talk to or who to call or what to do or where to go. So there's some really interesting pieces we'll also send through after this. We made a bit of a customizable welcome pack for people who can maybe put in, the phone number or the email to the administration person or the volunteer manager, as well as some training videos or, where to meet people, a little mud map of where to drive to, and sort of things like that. Things like newsletters, which I'll also get to in a second too. I've seen a lot of really great examples from people keeping that golden circle flowing by doing weekly, fortnightly, monthly newsletters and making it as concise and as valuable as possible. So even just like two paragraphs around, guys, we did this month and we want to have a shout out to these people for helping. And next month we're doing X, Y, and Z. Please let us know if you want to be available. Something really simple like that I saw being very valuable to the organization. Moving to the next one. So what powers a funnel? This was also another really interesting piece. We looked at when it comes to volunteering funnels, and we saw, well, if you've got that awareness piece to the onboarding and then to the activation and retention, I guess is the main three areas. We're asked all the times, it's like, what powers that? What stops people from continuing? What causes people to leave or causes them to stay for many years? I do some volunteering at Lifeline, and it's really interesting. There's some, as I said, some of the most amazing people I've ever met, and there's a group of people that are up to like their 30 or 35th year of volunteering there, and it's like phenomenal. And there's others who'll say, 2 years, 1 year, sort of 2 years, and I like to ask the people, what has kept you here for 35 years? What's the one thing that keeps you coming back? And these people are incredibly loving, but definitely their connection with those who need it most, and being a listening ear is something they take a lot of pride in. So that sort of aligned to their wants and values and beliefs, so that was perfect for them. But I guess when it comes to the funnel, one of the interesting pieces I found, and I've discussed this with a few other volunteer managers, and it's interesting to see the push forces versus the pull forces. The pull versus the push, I like to sort of say it's the push is sort of kind of like motivation. It gets you started, it gets you involved, it gets you connected, but it doesn't really get you going long term. I know from personal experience, it's like trying to get a fitness goal or lose weight. You can be motivated for a week, but unless you've got something pulling you, or something, a goal or something on the horizon to really drive you and pull you, it tends to only be short-term motivation push goals. So some of the things, I think they're both important, but some push factors, and it's really interesting to do a bit of an audit check on ourselves of, are we using push factors to get volunteers moving, or are we using pull factors? And I think for the push factors, they're sort of around, as I said, motivation, hard to maintain long term. It's more around awareness, motivation from peers. I've heard people say they keep coming back because they feel guilty that they keep being late to their shifts or cancelling them, or getting push factors around things like reminders, or as I said, those sort of SMSs. But as far as the pull factors, I think it's the easiest to maintain long term, and really is, as I said before, I think it comes down to aligning people's values to what their long term or their beliefs are and what they want to do in their life. And some of those were obviously very common one is desire to give back and nurturing their intrinsic purpose. So some people might say, before I die, I want to make sure that I have a positive contribution to the lives of animals around the world. So if there's someone having an organization that works with volunteers and sort of animals, I'd love to see that person volunteer there, because I could imagine they do great things and be there long term. Whereas someone who perhaps is in the corporate world and has very little time might volunteer once, but then they might be too busy and not really prioritize that for themselves. And I did highlight this point here. And something I found really, really interesting was around the desire to learn. And I mean, that's at the end of the day, we want volunteers to care about our purpose, but I found a really interesting pull factor was giving the volunteers something else. Obviously, we don't pay volunteers money, but as an exchange of value, they give us time and effort and energy, and it's like, what can we give them back? And there was an organization I spoke with a while ago, and they said they had a medical, I guess it was a research team, but they did awareness on topics in the medical fields. And they tried to get volunteers who were young medical professionals to do speaking spots and go to schools and run webinars like this. And part of theirs was they would endorse them and give them a certificate to say, you're the expert in this field at this organization. Or they would give them a shout out on LinkedIn or Facebook. And it turned out these young professionals loved that, because they were trying to expand their career, they were trying to do more and be more. And it turned out a lot of these young professionals were beginning to tell their friends and saying, oh, you've got to come here and volunteer here. It's a great professional development. I'm learning heaps and I'm making great connections. And they saw a lot of volunteers just by word of mouth start coming up. And I thought that's a really, really amazing factor. It's, as an organization, what is something that we can offer a volunteer that's not obviously financial and that, but maybe tangible or intangible that could keep them coming back and wanting to do more and I guess benefiting them in some way. And of course, like all balances and all factors in the world, there's always a push and a pull, and a resistance to this. So I guess looking at the volunteer funnel, there's the push factors and pull that keep them moving up the funnel and keeping them active. And then there's always, of course, the resistant factors. And I think not to get too mathematical, or I've got an engineering background, but I love to think there's got to be whichever the balance is. If there's more push and pull, obviously you've got to have more flowing in the right direction. But if there's more resistances, then there is push or pull. We're probably going to see more volunteers leave or less come on board. And I guess with this one here is, with the resistance factors, these are some examples that I've heard a lot around lack of awareness. We had a lot of volunteers I've spoken to who said, we told them about some of the people we work alongside, and they said, oh, that's fantastic. Like, I'd love to get involved with that. And then they said, but I didn't even know it existed. You know, if I'd known that existed 4 or 5 years ago, I would have definitely put my name down. There was lack of interest, which sort of went hand in hand in that, and that was around, yep, they knew they existed, but they sort of said, well, what does a volunteer do? You know, am I there mopping floors, or am I there petting dogs, or like, what is my role? What am I actually going to do if I come in and help out? They obviously, one of the key ones, not enough time availability in the schedule, not a big enough priority to commit long term, not easy enough to get involved or stay involved. That was a really interesting one, and of course, I think according to the ACNC, it's 70% of nonprofits are in that small to extra small category, which even the people running them barely have enough time themselves, which I totally understand. And it's like, if these people have less time, how can they make it simpler for other people? And sometimes they can't. They just sort of say, hey, we really need help and we need volunteers, full stop. But one interesting one I heard a lot was they were saying, you know, to find where they volunteer and to stay involved, they kept having to put a lot of effort in to chase people up and get involved. And eventually some people became too hard. And when other priorities in life crept up, they tend to just fall aside and then sort of go elsewhere. So that was really interesting around keeping them committed and keeping them easily connected through things like newsletters, etc. And then also, what am I getting out of this? Which sort of went into the hand of that other side. And again, I've heard people say, well, if volunteers have that mentality, then we don't want them. Which I can see that side of the story as well. But I think also too, when someone's giving time and effort and energy of their life, I think it's natural what people think, well, then what am I getting back for this? You know, it's people's jobs, they're always there, whether they like it or not, because they need to be there. But when it comes to volunteers, how can we excite them and maybe look at those pull factors and think, what can we offer a volunteer, or what can make them come back week after week, day after day, year after year? Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. And finally, on that last point too, how simple is the process? And I think, yep, you've got those push and pull factors, but at the end of the day, if we zoom out of that funnel and we look at the process from awareness, onboarding to involvement, I've seen some organizations that I said, and rightfully so, they need them to jump through many hoops and make sure they do the right checks and do the right background and filtering process to make sure the right volunteer is the right volunteer. But I've seen it sort of go the other way in a bad way, where they sort of make it needlessly complex. And volunteers, as I said, would love to help, but when it becomes a bit much, they sort of go, I don't have time for this. I need to go back to doing X, Y, or Z. So looking at, I guess, auditing and being very thorough with ourselves and saying, well, how easy it is if I was a volunteer to sign up, get involved, stay active, what would I like and what would I not like? I think some of that areas too as well. So some volunteers I've sort of seen, and they sort of say, well, I'm doing you a big favor. I mean, not to call Lifeline out, but I mean, there's those guys do an amazing job, and I've seen some volunteers who just flat out won't rock up to a shift and won't tell anyone. And speaking with sort of some of them, I was sort of asking, did you do that on purpose? And they said, oh, well, I'm helping them out anyway, so I'm doing them a favor. If they want me that badly, they can call me. And it's like, well, we can't all have that mentality, or else these organizations couldn't really function and do what they need to do. So I think looking at that process and how easy and simple is it for someone to get awareness, to onboard them, and then to keep them involved, and sort of seeing where some of the bottlenecks, or listening to maybe some of the feedback with people who leave. There's something I saw someone do when they leave. They send them a little Google form. It's, name if they feel comfortable, what their role was, how long they volunteered, and what was their reason for leaving. And that was really valuable, because some people just said, I'm moving to a different town. Sorry, I just can't. Whereas other people said, the amount of time needed to commit to this is too much. I can give 2 hours a month, but you guys need, say, 8. And they said, I just can't do that. So that was really interesting to think. If they're happy to commit 2 hours and a majority needs 2 hours, can we still run our operations in 2-hour stints of volunteers? And that may or may not be possible. And I guess looking back across, I'll just jump to this one. So I guess tying all those pieces together, one of the ones were that we speak with different organizations, and as I said, that coordination piece, the science of the science and art piece. If we could create like a bit of a template and saying, well, if we looked at a funnel, the very top of the world, and sort of tracked what the process looked like, from someone who doesn't know you exist, to hearing about you, to being interested, to filling out a form, to coming to an induction, to being active. And if we could map that and maybe even physically review and tweak that process and saying, where are all my volunteers coming from, and why are they staying and why are they going? So we sort of took all those lessons learned and we created like a little template. Some people might not get any value out of this, which is fine. Some people might find it very valuable, but I guess this was one of the templates which I said we'll give to Jean at the end of this, and you guys can hand out, and feel free to download your own. And I guess this was really to help get the conversation started with some organizations and see and map out where they're at. And what this sort of looks like, there'll be a video I think that comes along with that link, but I can run through now and sort of show you what that looks like. But if we looked at that, I guess the universe of volunteers, aka the community, and we looked at, I guess, all the different channels and all the different pathways in which volunteers might hear about us or find us. So we looked at the channel type, how many per month. So if we look at something like some common examples, Seek Volunteering, we might maybe get 4 applications a month. And also I want to note, this is just demonstration data, so don't take this too seriously. I just made this up. But it could be Seek Volunteering, could be just through the website from word of mouth, could be through Facebook or Facebook ads and paid ads. It could be through Go Volunteer, Community, newsletters, Volunteering Australia, or paid ads. And then what we've done here is that's all connected. So whatever each area, say if you had last week, there was Volunteering Australia, they got you like 10 new volunteers, which is phenomenal. But they would add to 30 and they would increase that. Then of those 30, the next question is how many go from expression of interest and they've become an inducted volunteer. So that's when we look down the funnel and we come across to here and we have a representation of that funnel, and we say, well, of that expression of interest form, we've got 39. And then if we tweak these different stages, and it looks like for this example, someone had an expression of interest form, a working with kids, a police check, and then that was all they needed to become a qualified volunteer. So we looked at that and they said, well, it's about 75% change from expression of interest form who actually complete the other forms. And then of those forms who move on to a police check, then that'd only be 80%. So if I looked at just those 2 conversion rates, which are quite high, I guess, and looking at the days in between, so it takes 3 days on average for someone to get from an expression of interest to working with kids. And then if we went working with kids to a police check, it looks like it takes 2 days on average. And if we take those conversion ratios, it looks like it goes from those 39 to 29 to 23. And it looks like there's, sorry, I missed this piece down here, an interview. So when it gets to an interview, it looks like it takes about 5 days and 90% goes to the next stage. So if we filter each of those stages out on the side here, it looks like 39 ends up with around about 21 volunteers as an end goal. And this is something that I try to chat with some teams about. And I say, well, let's just say you've got a Christmas appeal coming up and we need a minimum of 50 volunteers. Maybe we could reverse engineer this and say, if I need 50 and it looks like of 39, we get 21, which looks like a conversion rate down here of say 50% of people come in. If I need 50, then therefore I need to go and find 100 expression of interest forms, which if that was me, I'd probably come back to here and say, can I speak to Seek Volunteering and get some promoted ads, or can I look at other areas where there might be volunteers or community newsletters or notice boards and things like that? How can I try and fill the top of the funnel so that the bottom of the funnel has a few more active volunteers that we can get a part of? And obviously too, that just tallies up those donations, sorry, the total duration in days. So it looks like 10 days, 50% conversion, and hopefully over time, we'd love to see maybe at certain steps that 75 turns into 90%, which would be lovely, which then turns the conversion rate to 60, and then you got a couple more volunteers coming at the end of that funnel. Next part for this is, and I might be going a bit quick, but as I said, we'll send through a video in case people would like to go through this in their own time and in their own template. But we go from here, we've got active volunteers, and if we looked at this in total, I sort of strung a sentence together that said, after 10 days, we're able to convert and onboard about 25 new volunteers out of 39 volunteers, which means there are 14 volunteer applicants that we can later re-engage or for future volunteers or perhaps supporters in other ways. Speaking with a nonprofit hat on, they could be a donor or another supporter of a different kind. So my next question is, there's 2 ways these people go. They become new active volunteers, which is wonderful, and then we need to keep them engaged and connected. And then the next phase out of here would be if they're not engaged, if they don't become an active volunteer, how else can we engage them? And I think an important wheel, as I said over here, that's sort of a re-engagement wheel. If anyone's done marketing before. But this turns into, you could do a monthly newsletter. So say someone, for instance, got to the end of their process, didn't go ahead, didn't become an active volunteer, maybe we could keep them on a newsletter that sends them updates and keeps them involved with the organization. So hopefully maybe in a couple months time, a volunteer could spark their interest again and say, well, actually got more time now, I'm going to go back and reapply, and I'd love to get involved. So the end goal would be keeping them sort of on the side engaged and putting them back into the funnel, and then hopefully they become an active volunteer again. But some other areas around here could be updates on the organization. I guess organization I spoke to the other day serves meals, and you could say, hey, last month we served 200 meals, next month we want to serve 400, and would love some more help, and love to hear what people are doing to help that out. Some stories I heard from volunteers saying that they love to hear, if they're doing an impact and they're feeding people, hearing a story about someone, how it's helped them in their life, and giving some context to this work. Some upcoming events, if there's Christmas appeals, or if there's Mother's Day stalls or things like that, and their social impact around what's coming up for 2022, for instance. If there's big things on the horizon, maybe that might excite them to come back in and get involved. And some other ideas to really think about, keeping the volunteers engaged, how to sort of nurture them, and refining each stage as each step goes on, what's tweaks and changes we can make to this funnel or process to really improve both the volunteers' experience and then the organization as well. I'm cautious that is a whole lot of talking for one morning. I'll stop myself there, and I'll go back to Jean if she's still online, and if there are any questions that have come through.
Yep. Thank you so much, Alex. It's a very informative section. Thanks for that. And I do believe that there's many attendees will be really interested in the volunteer process that you just mentioned. So as Alex said, I'll be sending you the link so that you can just follow the link and download these very useful spreadsheets for your own use. So in the meantime, it's a Q&A section now. So please feel free to type your questions into the questions box. All right, I got a question for you, Alex. So this attendees is asking how to minimize the administration work, because you mentioned about the administration work is one of the really big thing that is consuming the time. So what's the best way, do you think?
That's a really good question, and I think it's quite a broad question too. I think it depends on different types of organizations. I think my first thought when I heard that question was looking to automate things through different platforms, so much so, but that doesn't ruin the connection to the volunteers. So there are examples, things like MailChimp or a campaign monitor or different emailing systems I've seen in the past. And I've noticed that there's organizations who, when someone signs up, it can trigger something on MailChimp, and then it can send them maybe a set of 3 emails. So when someone signs up and says, hey, we'd love to get involved, maybe you could put them on a 1-week cadence and can send them, hey, welcome, here's a video about what we do, here's the journey ahead, we'll get back to you soon, look forward to you filling out your forms. And maybe some more automated versions of emails seems to be quite a less onerous effort on the administrators, and then have to call people up individually and chase them. Another one that I've seen, there's a platform called Text Magic, and there's many other different platforms out there, but there's SMS platforms, which one of the lessons learned we've had in engaging volunteers is that the different age demographics, we work with 18-year-olds up to 83-year-olds was another male who helps us out. And some people love technology, some people hate it, but text messaging was by far a very well-received version of this. So one thing I saw was that when people were signing up to the organization, they had a list of all the emails, or even if you ask for a phone number, and adding all those phone numbers into something like Text Magic or some version of an SMS system, and maybe even sending them out an SMS that does it in bulk. And that saves a lot of time of saying, hey guys, I saw you, and I'm just talking about people who are on the onboarding, saying, hey, thank you so much for applying. We love that you were excited to come help us. We noticed you got stuck partway. Please feel free to jump in and get started again, or if not, give us a call and we can move you forward. And then that can also be for existing operations. So volunteers are already active, keeping them involved, as I said before, it's something like a newsletter or something like automated text messages. So things that something did Involvy, a shameless plug, but something didn't Involvy was like automatic SMS reminders, and getting things like when you go see a dentist and they say, the day before they said, hey, you still okay for your appointment at 2 o'clock tomorrow? Please reply back yes or no. And so there are other systems out there. As I said, Text Magic, and there's another one that escapes me right now. But having simple reminders, I think, is one you can automate. But then I'm also part of that administration, I think, in my opinion, is really hard to refine because it becomes about connecting with the volunteers. So seeing what you can automate, what you can't automate, or what you're willing to automate, what you're not willing to automate, starts that conversation.
Thank you, Alex. And we got another interesting questions. So with everyone working from home, how can we keep them engaged?
That's another really good question. Again, I've probably seen probably two sides to that. I remember hearing some really good examples of like a games night. I know some of the guys for a different organization, they did like a board games in like a Zoom meeting, and you can do breakout rooms, but they did a trivia night, which was really fun, and they got people to dial in and get involved. And then I also got told by another volunteer who will remain nameless, and they said, if I get sent another Zoom link, I'll scream. So I also understand sometimes doing all these Zoom parties and things like that can be tedious, and I know it's been a really difficult time for say Sydney and Melbourne, who have had a lot of lockdowns. So it does sort of push that envelope, but I think there's things whilst people in lockdowns, I think being very genuine and honest around those areas, and maybe even having an email that is a status update for what's going on. Something we heard a lot in a lot of internally here at Orange Sky were people saying, as long as I know what's going on with the organization, they're happy to stay engaged. So they don't, some people don't need fun games, nights and conversations. They just want to know where's everything at. So they do things like monthly announcements through, again, like a Zoom, which we're limited on our options during lockdown, but like a Zoom, or if not, a really nice newsletter that says, hey guys, we're still in lockdown, you know, that we've got the team doing X, Y, and Z jobs. We're hoping to in the next couple of weeks pending these things, and would love some help. And I think my last point on that question also is, don't be afraid to ask the volunteers, something that I think is really important. In any sort of aspect, an end user, an end state person, just maybe even asking them and saying, hey guys, we'd love to keep everyone involved and active, and we love that you're all part of us, all part of our journey. What would you guys like to see? And maybe even a really quick survey you could sort of send out and say, would you like a games night, or would you like a bulletin, or would you like anything else in that area? And I've seen people also say, as they said, they're working with an organization who says helping the homeless. Maybe they don't want to do a games night, maybe they don't want a newsletter. What you can do is share related content to the organization. So things about what's the USA doing, or what are people in the UK doing with some of their homeless programs. And I think that's always really interesting, because people obviously come to you for a reason, because they like what you do, and sharing related content around what you do is always really exciting.
Yep, that's a really, really good idea. So let me see if we have any more questions. So I guess we got one more question. So it's about, you mentioned about some Facebook ads, some landing pages. So what do you think is the most useful and cost-effective way in order to get the volunteers on board?
That's a good point. There is I think deep down there is always, I work with some startups too, and it's a very similar question. They sort of say, I'd love to have $5,000 a month to go do paid Facebook ads, but we're not always that lucky. I'd say, paid ads, they can offer a return on investment, but I think the most cost-effective way is always word of mouth. But then again, that's not always the easiest. So my recommendation for these ones is always, my opinion is, so if you were a volunteering organization that had volunteers, for instance, you needed to be sports coaches. Just thought of one I spoke to the other day, sports coaches. You could go out and offer something to different sporting associations. So I've seen people go and do a speech, or even like a webinar like this, and they go out to, there's already pools of your demographic of volunteer that already exist in the community. So they could be part of sporting programs, they could be sports, I'll use that same example, the sports associations of Queensland or New South Wales or Victoria, or there could be influencers on Instagram or something like that. But essentially, in my opinion, there's already groups of your perfect volunteers that exist in the community, and it's a matter of how can you dial into those groups of volunteers that exist. And I think the best way to do that is offering something of value to them that's not as costly to you. So obviously you can't buy them things and hats, and that's going to cost too much. But maybe you could do a speech about helping the community to, say, a local sporting organization, and saying, hey, as refs and coaches and sporting and athletes, as that example, here's this really great organization. We're doing these really cool things. And this is why we started. We've helped 1,000 people, and we're wanting to do more next year. Is anyone interested? So that, if you say present it to 50 to 60 people, or maybe even 10 people, hopefully on that funnel there might be some who would connect with that and go, yeah, actually I'm going to go sign up. But I think, yeah, word of mouth and trying to find those pools of volunteers in your demographic, or who you would consider a good volunteer, to sort of line up to your organization.
Yes,
I hope that makes sense.
absolutely. Yeah, of course. All right, so I believe that's pretty much about the questions today. Yeah, it's a really interactive sections, lots of questions. And then, as I said, I will send you a follow-up emails with the link so that you can always refresh yourself and dip into the sections again. And of course, you can always share with your friends as well, so that, yeah, everyone can benefit from it. So before we finish, so we got a little bonus at the end. So as I believe you can see the screen now. So we are having a very great section. It's called Creating Powerful Customers or Course Communities. So it's really about how to make a very hyper personalized content for your social media. So this sections was $50, but since you have already engaged with us, so we would like to share with you this little incentive. So there's a $20 off for you if you use the discount code. So this is exclusively for the audience today. So feel free to register through the QR code that you are seeing now, or just go to our webpage, the training and education sections. And I'll also post this information into the same follow-up email. So if you are interested, feel free to share with your friends and just register. So this section will be on next Thursday for an hour. All right, so enough for me. Thank you very much, Alex. And I'll see you again, yeah, very soon, next week. All
Thanks
right,
so much, guys. Thanks, John, for attending.
bye-bye.
Bye.